Hi everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Saajid. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video comes to you from my car. I'm actually on campus. I came to run some errands really quickly and I of course have my mask. But before I do that, I thought that I would just do a little wrap up for y'all, talk about the books that I read over the past couple of months or so. I read 2 books in August, 2 books in September, and then I read 2 books in October. So I thought that I would let you all know about those books. Before I get into that though, I just wanted to say I know I've been kind of absent for a while. I'm honestly going to be like that for the rest of the year because school is getting really busy. I have my first seminar next week, and earlier this week I had to submit a 10,000 word proposal for that seminar. So I'm exhausted. Starting off with the books that I read in August. In August I read 2 books, as I said, the first of which was The Map of Salt and Stars by Saajid. I really enjoyed this story. This is set in Syria. It's about this girl named Noor who grew up in Manhattan actually, but because her father passed away, her mother decides to relocate the family back to their homeland of Syria, and they don't spend too long there until their neighborhood is bombed and they end up having to flee across different countries in the Middle East and North Africa. And we're also following a second story in this book, which is a fictional story, or allegedly fictional story, that Noor's father used to tell her when she was younger about this brave woman named Rawia who pretended to be a man to join this famed map maker named Al-Idrisi, who I believe was an actual historical figure, to map the world. Essentially, they traveled across the Middle East and North Africa to try to map the area. We're reading these 2 stories together and we see a lot of parallels between them, and a lot of the same things that happen in Rawia's supposedly fictional story is happening to Noor in different ways, and you begin to question as you keep reading whether Rawia's story was actually fictional or not. And it was a really beautiful read. I think the writing in here is spectacular. Saajid's writing style is phenomenal, and I think they do a really great job at kind of capturing the essence of the environment and everything. The historical chapters, or these chapters about Rawia, reads very much like one of those Arabian tales and whatnot, and it was just really beautifully done. The book also addresses really, poignant themes of, the refugee crisis, of, political instability in the Middle East and what that looks like for innocent civilians, essentially. And it looks at, it questions borders and countries and land, and how these things are so arbitrary, but they, are so significant in the way that we organize our lives. It was a really impactful, powerful read. I wouldn't say that I remember too much about this story because it's been a couple of months, and although I really liked it, I don't think it left a very lasting impact. I don't recall it a lot. I don't think about it a lot anymore, but it was still a very good story. It was impactful, but not in a lasting way. That being said though, I definitely look forward to reading more from this author. I believe they have a new book coming out this month called 30 Names of Night. I will not be reading it until maybe next year or so, but I'm very excited to check it out because it sounds really good. The next book I read in August was Sirius Blooms at Night by Shani Mutu. I read Valmiki's Daughter earlier this year and absolutely freaking loved it. So after reading that, I knew that I wanted to read more from Shani Mutu, so I went back to this book. This is her debut novel that came out way back in the 90s, before I was born. It's set on a fictional Caribbean island called Lantana Camera that is very much inspired by Trinidad, because Mutu is a Trinidadian writer, and we're following the story of this woman named Mala Ramchandran. It's told through the perspective of a guy named Tyler who works at the nursing home where Mala is admitted to, and he basically is caring for Mala. She has had somewhat of a very infamous reputation in her neighborhood as the village crazy lady, and people just don't like her, but Tyler takes an interest in her and he begins to learn about her past and how tumultuous it was, and how that essentially shaped her into becoming the person that she is today. So he tells us a lot about like his interactions with her in the present, but then he goes deeper into her past, and we get to really see in a non-linear, very disjointed fashion how Mala came to be and how she came to be the person that she is today. It is one of the most beautifully written stories that I've ever read. Shani Mutu could write a 500-page book about Iraq and I would read it. Her writing is absolutely spectacular. Other than that, this book addresses some really interesting themes. It addresses queerness. Mala herself, I don't think we ever get to find out whether she's queer or not throughout the story, but all of the other characters, most of them were queer, and I really enjoyed seeing that intersection of queerness and being Indo-Caribbean, specifically in the time period that this book was set in as well. It looks at the consequences of assault, of, you know, abandonment, of colonialism, and how these things can affect and shape the life of one person, one individual person, and their mental health. It's just a really, really impactful read, and I read this for Bashment Book Club. I read it a couple months early. We had the live show just the other day. You could go watch it right now, and that was one of the best live shows we had, because this is such a phenomenal read. We just had so many things to talk about, and we had a really, really amazing, fruitful discussion. So if you've read it and you'd like to know more detailed spoilery thoughts, I definitely highly recommend that you check out me, Paige, and Linnell's discussion, because I think it was a really, really great live show. One of my favorite things about this book that we discussed in the live show too was the unconventional storytelling. I kind of alluded to it before, but the storytelling in this book is very non-linear. We start off when Mala is old, and then we go back to her childhood, and then we go back to when she's kind of a little bit more middle-aged, and then we go back to her young adult teenage years. And that might sound kind of like a weird way to tell the story, but when you read it, you actually figure out how it made sense. It kind of goes against like what is conventional in storytelling. Like Shani Mutu, and I've read 3 of her books right as of this point, and she does a very non-linear, kind of non-conventional storytelling. She does what she wants. She gives you whichever perspectives she wants. She, you know, tells the timeline in whatever order she wants to. And I think, you know, even though it might seem very random and very all over the place while you're reading it, when you get to the end of the story, you really see how it all makes sense, and how her decision to write the story in the way that she did was phenomenal. She's an amazing writer, and this is the first of 2 books from her that I will be talking about in this video. So yeah, hold on for that though. Let's talk about what I read in September. I read another Bashment Book Club read. The live show for that will be linked up above as well, and that was The Starside of Bird Hill by Naomi Jackson. This is set in Barbados in the 1980s, and this is about 3 women. Hyacinth, who's like in her 60s, and her 2 granddaughters, Dion and Phaedra, and they live in this very tight-knit, I guess more rural, predominantly Christian community called Bird Hill in Barbados. Dion and Phaedra are actually from New York. They grew up in New York, but April, their mother, Hyacinth's daughter, could no longer care for them for reasons, and she decides to send them to spend the summer of 1989 with Hyacinth in Bird Hill. And this is one of the most complex stories that I've read in a while. It also has a very unconventional storytelling style, because I would say that this is kind of like 2 or 3 stories in one. We get one arc in the first 100 pages, and in the next 100 pages we get another story arc, and in the last 100 pages we get another story arc. So it kind of feels like a few stories melded into one, all about these 3 women, this woman and her granddaughters. And it is such a sad book because of the things that happened in it, and I was not expecting it to be as sad as it was. Serious Moves at Night was sad too, but I was forewarned that that book was going to be absolutely devastating. I didn't know that this book was going to be that as well, but I really, really enjoyed it. It's a story about womanhood. It's a story about, you know, having to come into womanhood before you should. I mean, the girls, their mother could no longer care for them. She was depressed. There was all sorts of problems with the mother, and so the girls kind of had to fend for themselves. And, you know, they came back to Barbados, and they're having to adjust to this new environment that's supposed to be their home, right? Because they were originally from Barbados, or their mother is from Barbados, but it's such a foreign environment from what they're used to compared to Brooklyn. And, you know, we see this grandmother having to challenge herself to take care of 2 young girls when she wasn't quite really prepared for it, and what that looked like for her, and how she kind of had to adjust her own parenting style and her own outlook on life to be able to accommodate the girls. And that was a really interesting challenge that we saw for the grandmother as well. It's just a really great book. There's so much things that I could talk about. There's so much things that I could touch on. But it's just one of those books that you just have to read and see what you make of it on your own. I really liked it. There were some things that I didn't care for. Sometimes the writing was a little bit not, you know, it wasn't bad or anything. Like, there were some passages that were really great. But sometimes, I don't know, something about the writing just didn't really click with me. I felt like the story kind of dragged at some points. And then the ending was really weird. Not like bad weird. Like, it was a good ending, but it was strange. and I didn't quite get what the author was trying to do there, but at the end of the day, it was a good read, and I would still highly recommend that you check it out. The second book that I read in September, I actually listened to on audio, and that is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. This is Doughty's memoir of when she first entered the death industry as a crematory worker in San Francisco. So if you don't know Caitlin Doughty, she has a YouTube channel called Ask a Mortician. She's a mortician. She talks about death. Her videos are amazing. I read one of her books, From Here to Eternity, earlier this year, and I really, really loved it, so I wanted to get into some more of her work. So I decided to listen to her memoir, and it was phenomenal. If you don't know anything about what it's like to work in a crematory, this book gives you a very, very intimate, vivid picture of what that looks like. And Caitlin does not shy away when describing dead bodies. And that's one of the first things that I really like about her. She and her work is meant to be very confronting. She talks about death in a way that's confronting. She wants people to understand that death is part of our lives. And in our Western culture, we kind of tend to remove ourselves from death. We distance ourselves from it. And oftentimes people don't know what a dead body looks like. Like when you watch TV, dead bodies look so peaceful, and they're like, they don't actually look like that. Like dead bodies are a lot more messy, and that's a very confronting, difficult thing for us to have to think about, but that's the reality. And I like the way that she talks about death and about confronting it. She also criticizes the Western capitalist death industry, which is a critique that I really appreciate. How, especially in America, funerals are now required to be these very grandiose things where, oh god, now it's raining. Funerals are required to be this very grandiose thing where you embalm the body, you put it in like this sort of like suit and tie, and you put it in like a very expensive casket, and all these very unnecessary, superfluous things. And it's not meant to judge people who do that, but it's meant to kind of criticize how we shroud death in all this glory when in reality we are unable to actually confront it. I just really love the way that she talks about death, and there's so many other things in this book that I could talk about, but I mean, I just don't really have like the capacity, I guess, to express everything that this book made me feel. There was one scene in particular, actually, where Caitlin was talking about how she was rejected by somebody that she really liked, and it led her into a very dark place. And she made connections with death when she was talking about rejection. And as somebody who was kind of dealing with something similar, and is also kind of coming to terms with like, death anxiety and all that kind of stuff, that was just a very, very impactful thing. Okay, the rain just decided to stop. Okay, cute. That was just a very impactful thing for me. And so there were moments in this book that really touched me, and when I read that part, or listened to that part rather, I cried a little bit because it really impacted me. So this is a book that I think will leave a lasting impression. I definitely will be reading more from Caitlin Doughty in the future, and I will be religiously watching every video that she posts on Ask a Mortician, and you should too. I will link her channel in the description. You will not regret it. Go watch her videos. So finally, we're on to the two books that I read in October. The first of which is the other Shani Mutu book I was mentioning, and that is Polar Vortex. Now, whereas Serious Blooms at Night is an older book that was published in the 90s, this book was actually published this year. So it was very interesting reading two books by Mutu that are published 20-something years apart. You really see like the difference in her writing, but I would say that her writing is still excellent. It's just that with this story, it's so different from Serious Blooms at Night that she had to write it in such a different way. And it was really interesting kind of seeing like that old book of hers and reading this new one and kind of comparing them. Not one is better than the other. This one is just completely different. It's set in Canada, and we're following a woman named Priya, originally from Trinidad. She moved to Canada when she started university, and now she's in like her 50s or 60s. She is living with her girlfriend, or her wife, Alex, and they have been together for quite some time, and they've settled into this very happy life together. And somebody from Priya's past decides to show up again and complicate things, and this person is someone who Priya tries to avoid because they make her confront a part of herself that she is not quite sure how to confront. So you kind of get to see the book is set during the course of one day, and this person coming back is causing a lot of tensions between Priya and Alex. So a lot of the book is very much focused on the tensions between these two women and what's going through Priya's mind. It also delves into a lot of flashbacks as well, of Priya's life when she met the person, when she first moved to Canada as an immigrant and stuff like that. So there's a lot of flashbacks, and again, Shani Mutu is just going back and forth in time. She's giving us some different perspectives. There's a point in the book where we get a perspective from Alex, and it's like a stream of consciousness. It's like a psychological romp where Priya is trying to avoid coming to terms with reality. We get to kind of realize at some point that she's even a bit of an unreliable narrator when we get some perspective from Alex, and you start to realize that there are certain things that she's not telling you about the flashbacks and about the past with this person, and we get to see that there's a lot of gaps in her narration. And the book kind of explores, repressing things that traumatized you, repressing things that make you question yourself in a very uncomfortable way, and how oftentimes people, instead of dealing with things, instead of confronting things, instead of facing things head on and trying to understand yourself, you just repress things, you put it to the side, you twist the narrative in your own mind so that you could trick yourself into thinking that you're going to live an easier life, when in reality you're just bottling things up, you're just sweeping things under the rug, and when you lift the rug up, or when the rug is no longer there, there's all of this dust, right? That was a cute analogy. Ooh, I think it's kind of corny, but like, you get what I mean. Like, it's a very interesting story, the way that it's told, and it's about the consequences of not communicating, of not confronting your reality, and of denial, and what that looks like and what that could lead to. And we see the consequences of that in the end of this book, and it was quite a heartbreaking book when you get to the end of it. I was like, shit, that's fucked up. That was a brilliant read. I absolutely loved it. Shani Mutu is one of my new favorite writers. I have a couple other novels that I bought from her that I will be reading hopefully by the end of the year, because her work is phenomenal. The last book that I have to talk about, I actually read Fortnight Frights. I didn't get around to any of the books on my TBR except for one, and the one book that I did get around to reading was the one group read, and that book was Things We Lost in a Fire by Mariana Enriquez, which was translated from Spanish by Megan McDowell. I will leave the link to the live show that we did over on Saajid's channel about this book. It was phenomenal, surprisingly phenomenal. I didn't know what to expect with this book, and I didn't think that I would like it, but it was brilliant. It was so freaking good. This is a collection of short stories set in a particular historical time period in Argentina, I think during the 1990s, I'm not sure, but it was set after, I think, the dictatorship or something like that. I don't know too much about Argentine history. If you watch the live show, Isabella, who was one of the participants, she actually did some reading. She did her homework when she was reading the collection, and she did kind of inform us about, like, Argentinian history, and where some of the short stories in this collection kind of matched with things that were actually happening on the ground. So definitely check out the live show. But I really loved this collection, because what Enriquez does is she takes these stories and these realities that people did live in Argentina during that time, and she twists it into a horror collection. So all of these stories have an element of horror or darkness or something macabre or supernatural or paranormal happening, and she connects that to kind of, I guess, like the politics or the instability that existed at the time. Some of the stories are just kind of like spooky, eerie stories that make you question whether or not they were paranormal. Some of them are outright like fabulous and paranormal things are happening. Some of them are like straight up horror. Like, listen, when I read the first 3 stories, they were spooky but not scary, and I was like, okay, this is not a scary collection, because I was reading at night and I was wondering, wait, is this horror? Am I going to be scared because it's nighttime? And I read the first 3 stories and I was like, this ain't no horror. And then I read the 4th story, and the 4th story is straight up some scary shit.
Lord of my monitor! Damn, this is some scary shit! Oh, I am scared!
I was so creeped out, I had to put the book down. I couldn't read it for the rest of the night. I had to put it down and go to sleep. I had to take a sleeping pill so I could fall the hell to sleep, because that story creeped me out, and I was starting to hear things outside my room. You know how it is when you're watching or reading horror. I was like, oh my god, it was so good. That story was actually called Adela's House, and if you read the book, you might think it's that scary, because it really isn't, but I'm I'm easily scared by the littlest of things. So I really enjoyed that story. I enjoyed another story called Under Black Water, which is about this polluted river in Argentina, and the story kind of hints at something living within the river. And what I like about that story, and what I like about Adela's house, which is a haunted house story, is that they both kind of had this situation where a place was the antagonist, the place was the evil entity itself. And I find that to be so creepy and so scary, and I really enjoyed the way that Enriquez kind of weaved those sort of horror tropes and elements into the exploration of what was happening in Argentina at the time. I just thought it was brilliant. It was a really, really fantastic collection. Definitely a lot better than I was expecting, and definitely a new favorite. Like, y'all need to read this book. It was great. So those were all of the books that I read over the past 3 months. They were really good. Like, I have amazing taste in literature. I don't understand how y'all read books and don't like them. Read all of the books that I tell you to read, because I know what's good. So that's it for this video. I'm sorry if it's not up to my usual standards, but I'm kind of rusty. I haven't done this in a while, and I'm not home, and I feel kind of awkward because, like, I'm in the public. If you have any thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned today, please leave them in the comments down below. Thank you all ever so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely, lovely day, and until next time, inshallah, keep reading.